What is going on, you guys? In today's podcast, I want to talk about the single greatest lever that you can pull in your business. What is it? It's focus. And I'm going to tell you what I mean by focus, what it's done for me in my business. And by the end of this, you'll understand why I believe focus to be one of the most important things you can do to grow your business. Who am I? My name is Ryan Rice. My first 4 years in real estate, I've grown my business from $58,000 in revenue in my first year to last year we did just under $1.2 million. And I make these to share my journey, give you any tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, and hopefully that can make you a better real estate investor. Before I explain to you why I think this is the greatest lever to pull, let me tell you what it's done for me in my business. And I'll do this by giving you some context on my business over the last 4 years. My first year, I successfully flipped 2 houses. Now, I bought 11, but I only sold 2 of those. And I made $58,000 off those 2 flips, and so my revenue year one was $58,000. In January of the next year, I launched a marketing channel. The first year, I bought those 11 houses off the MLS. And in September of this my second year, after I launched the first marketing channel in January, I launched the same marketing channel in a different market. And so in year 2, my business grossed around $358,000. Not too bad, right? $58,000 to $358,000. More money, good. Well, my third year was the first full year I ran those 2 marketing channels in the 2 different markets, and my business grossed $628,000. And again, $358,000 to $628,000. More money, good, right? Except what I found towards the end of that third year is I was having to run 2 sets of contractors, 2 teams of realtors, building private money partnerships in 2 different markets, learning the dynamics of 2 different markets, and my attention was spread very thin. Now, I had more volume coming through my pipeline in terms of leads, deals, etc., but the business was difficult to grow because I had to split my attention between the 2 markets. And one market took off, and I hired a full-time project manager there because it was the market I wasn't local to. But most of that year, I had only 2 full-time employees, and that project manager being one of the full-time employees. And so half of my leadership attention was focused on that other market. And as I started to figure out what I wanted to do, what the outlook of my business was, I hired a coach to help. And this was a coach that was on pace to do about $6 million last year. And so he was making significantly more money than me. And as we talked through my business, one of the first things he said was, well, you need to shut down that market, referring to the market that was distant to where I lived. And honestly, this wasn't the first time that this thought had popped in my brain. I had considered that before, but when a guy who's going to make almost 10x what I was going to make last year said that I should shut down that market, it really reinforced the thought that it was probably the right move. And so what did I do? I ended up shutting it down. And I shut it down about 4 months into the year. So I left that market around April of last year. And so the results I'm about to go over with you were only a result of about 8 months of focus. And this is how powerful it is, but hear me out here. Last year, my average profit per deal increased by more than 60%. And that metric alone, I think, is insane because even if I changed nothing else about my business, my profit increased last year by 60%. And I did this and my marketing costs stayed the same, right? I was splitting marketing between 2 markets, but when I shut one market down, I took some of that spend and put it into the market I stayed in, and not having to pay a full-time project manager just saved my business even more money. As a result, too, of switching down to one market, I built deeper relationships with more buyers in one market. And, well, how was I able to build deeper relationships with more buyers? Well, very simply, I just got to spend more time talking to more buyers in that one market versus trying to build relationships in both. And because my attention wasn't split when I dropped down to one market, I found myself able to work on things in my business like spending more time on building trainings, building onboardings, doing development for my team, etc. And so what was the result? Well, last year my business did just under 1.2 million. And in the market I stayed in, the business there nearly tripled versus the prior year. And so those results alone are a great example of what focus in a business can do. But also I want to take a little bit more of a zoomed out look at focus. All right. Another thing that grew my business this year, and it's hard to quantify by a certain amount, but another thing that grew the business is the amount of things other than my business that I said yes to. I brought that down to nearly zero, right? I didn't go on trips. I didn't travel for masterminds like I had in previous years. My wife and I said no to a lot of extracurricular activities. And we told ourselves at the beginning of the year we were going to enter this season of focus. That's exactly what we did. And it helped my business tremendously. And the last piece of focus I want to touch on is just strategy in my business. The amount of real estate investors I meet who tell me that they're buying rentals so that they won't have to pay taxes on their income is really amazing to me. And these are investors who are taking home maybe a couple to a few $100,000 per year in many cases. And in a lot of cases, they're taking home less than that, but are still buying rentals so that they, quote, don't have to pay taxes. And they believe, because other gurus or other people have told them this, that they need to buy rentals so that they don't need to pay taxes, right? But let's take a deep dive into this. Let's look at a very specific scenario. Let's say you're a real estate investor who makes $250,000 a year take home. And so to be safe, you're going to pay $75,000 a year in taxes. But to prevent having to pay $75,000 a year in taxes, you buy rental property so that you can cost segregate and, offset your tax burden. And now what you're doing is you're running two businesses. You have your active business where you're making your active income, and then you have your rental business. All right. And because you're new to the rental business, you're learning lots of lessons on how to get and find and maintain good tenants. And in fact, your first few tenants didn't work, so you had to turn the property a few times. There was vacancy. You had to coordinate consistent maintenance for the property. Maybe you had to evict a tenant because she refused to leave for whatever reason. And before you know it, your rental business is consuming 40, maybe 50% of your time. And you're doing all of this to save $75,000 in taxes. Well, what if you took that 40 to 50% of your time and you simply focused on how could you make more than $75,000 more in your active income, right? And do you think that if you focused your attention on how to make more active income for 5 years straight, that you could grow your business so substantially that the quote tax problem that you had in the first place isn't even relevant, right? Or now you have a bigger tax problem, but you pay more in taxes now because you make significantly more in active income than you did when you originally tried to solve the problem of saving $75,000 in taxes. And so I see so many people trying to solve this wrong problem in business. And in real estate, I think it's all too common because a lot of people say, oh, real estate's great. You should pay no money in taxes. But they're barely making any active income, right? And simply, if you solve the problem of figuring out how to 10x your income, then the original problem of trying to not pay $75,000 in taxes is just a non-factor. Now, for the record, I'm not saying that buying real estate to offset taxes is a terrible thing, but if you're not making substantial income and you're diverting half your attention so that you can save 30% of your active income in taxes, to me, it just seems very backwards. And so what I personally am doing is I'm going to focus 100% of my attention in getting my active income to be so high that the original amount I'd want to save in taxes is irrelevant to begin with. And when that's the case, maybe then I'll want to buy a big apartment building or something to that effect to start to truly reduce my tax burden. But buying rentals before you make substantial income, in my opinion, is just the woman in the red dress distracting you from your full potential as a business owner, right? So as we kick off 2025 here, maybe ask yourself, what one thing that if I focus literally 100% of my attention on would make all of my other problems that I'm potentially trying to solve go away? And maybe consider focusing on that one thing for an extended period of time. So if you guys got some value out of this, send it to a friend, tap the finger below to give the podcast a rating, or maybe share it to your Instagram story. Sharing it is the one way that this podcast grows, which is the one metric that tells me that I should keep shouting into the screen here. But I appreciate y'all, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.